DA says it will submit a Promotion of Access to Information Act application to all state departments to obtain performance assessments of ministers. It comes after the presidency informed members of the media that it wasn't obliged to publicly release the executive's assessments. For more on this conversation, we're joined now by the Deputy DA Chief Whip, Dr Annelie Lotriet. Good to have you, and thank you very much for coming on this evening. The presidency says performance assessments of cabinet ministers will remain confidential because the president says he doesn't want this information to be weaponized in political fights to make his colleagues look bad.
Yes, good evening. I think that is actually an admission on the side of the president that his cabinet members are not performing, because if there was something to be proud of, you would want to shout it out there. So I think the main problem here is that once again, as we've seen in the 6th Parliament and even before that, that accountability is a problem. How else will we hold ministers to account if their performance assessments has not been made public? So that is why we're going the route now of PIA applications.
So when did you initially make the application to the Minister of Monitoring and Evaluation, and what was her response?
Well, this was some time ago, and the response was exactly that it isn't necessary for the President to make this public and for us to be informed. So it was definitely an effort not to make it available. We are asked the question, however, have these performance assessments been done? And we have a suspicion and a very, well, basically strong belief that they haven't been done because ministers aren't being held to account. If you look at the performance the past couple of years, it is quite clear that ministers aren't held to account. Some of the worst performing ministers are still sitting there as ministers.
So the accusation, I suppose, for lack of a better word, is that the direction that the DA is going to take with this is going to be less than constructive. In fact, to use their words, unfortunately, the DA will seek out that information to make a political statement, either against the administration or against a particular minister. And that was not the goal of the president.
The problem is that they are making it into a political matter because there's clearly an unwillingness and not really an appetite to be held accountable. So then accusing the DA of making games out of this and that we are going to use it and weaponize it for political purposes, that is what we are supposed to do. That is what an opposition is. And a minister should not fear it being weaponized if he or she does their job. It's as simple as that. So don't try and hide away. Be honest, be frank, and if people have not been performing, what has been done to actually rectify their performance, and why are they still there if they're totally underperformance? So I think it's a way of trying to get out of this, because it is embarrassing for the government.
In a sense, the president is saying, no, these things were really for me to ensure that when I go out there, make promises to people, and I task my ministers to do certain things that they are able to prioritize those things as outlined in the promises that I make publicly, and they perform these as speedily as possible. So it was really to help me, not necessarily that it is something that I'm going to use to embarrass them in the public.
Well, I think the President should perhaps refer to Section 92(2) of the Constitution, which holds that members of the Cabinet is accountable to Parliament. And that's exactly why we want those performance evaluations, because that is what Parliament does. So I'm sorry for the President, but he clearly does not understand the role of the Parliament in having oversight and assessing the work of his Cabinet ministers.
You believe that there is, I mean, you would know in previous attempts, I think you're still in some kind of process of trying to get the minutes of the what you call the cadre deployment committee, and now decisions are made. Do you think that there is record of these assessments that the president is keeping somewhere filed?
Well, I think there should be records. If not, it means they've never been done, because what use is an assessment for your future performance and improvement if there's no record? If it's just a chat, a friendly chat, well, you didn't do this or didn't do that, that's not good enough. Remember, ministers are paid by the taxpayer, and they have to be held to account.
What of the view then that says, well, look, annual reports are out there for the public to see. There is really no escaping scrutiny. If the public wanted to assess the performance of ministers, they would be assessed based on the annual reports that get published regularly in portfolio committees and so on and so forth.
An annual report is something that is produced by a department, and it is not an assessment of the minister's own performance in that department. It is a general overview of what the department has done. It doesn't mean that you have a very good minister, because the minister could be lacking in a number of ways. So, no, you cannot use the annual performance reports to keep a minister to account. It is a tool, but we want to see what was the agreement of performance and what was the assessment. Did the ministers live up to that agreement they apparently made with the president? So that is what we want to know. Not a department's report.
Quite interesting. It's going to be a very interesting court case, it seems, to try and get around this, because they are also raising employer-employee kind of privilege, where to say, I mean, yourself, Dr. Lotriet, you wouldn't necessarily want your business with your employer to be made public.
Well, if I'm in a position that I have to deliver services, if I'm in government, I would not mind having that in the public, because I'm paid by the taxpayer and they should know what's going on and whether they're actually getting value for their money. And the public have to know, well, what has happened, because we have very poor service delivery. We don't have electricity. We don't have water in many places. The water is undrinkable. We have unemployment. So where does the buck stop? It stops with the minister and the president.
All right. So you have drafted your papers, are ready to go?
Yes.
Right. Looking forward to see what you'll be putting out there. The Deputy Chief Whip of the Democratic Alliance there, Dr. Annelie Lotriet.